The Los Angeles Rams escape with a narrow 26-17 victory on Thursday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. One of the weirdest games I've ever watched in my entire life. What happened in this contest? We'll break it all down on this episode of the Locked On Rams podcast.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rams Nation, what is going on? As always, it is your boy, your host, Sosa Kremenjas. I'm a fantasy analyst at PFF and your host here at the Locked On Rams podcast, your number one daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Rams and part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you guys for diving into another episode here at the Locked On Rams pod. As your first daily listen, you guys know exactly what we're going to cover in this episode. The Los Angeles Rams, like I mentioned in the intro there, the tease, they won this Thursday night football game in week 5 to kick off the 5th week in the NFL's 2021 season by a score of 26-17. We're going to dissect everything that happened in this contest, the good, the bad, the ugly. And I swear to you, I'm still sweating, actually. This was the weirdest game I think I've ever watched in my entire life. I've watched football intensely, nonstop, every single weekend for 20 years. And this was about the strangest game that I could ever recall, because if you're a person who didn't watch it, or if you fell asleep at halftime, I feel bad for you. I mean, this was the weirdest changeup I've really ever seen. In the first half, the Rams were terrible. They scored 3 points. They were down 7-3 at halftime. I mean, they were awful. The only thing they really did that was worth anything in the first half was they had a drive where they get into the red zone. And I don't know what Matthew Stafford is doing on second down. It was like a 2nd and 10 kind of situation there. And he tries to throw the ball away, I think. And he throws it right into the middle of the end zone. And it's picked off by Quandre Diggs, the safety on the Seahawks. One of the worst interceptions you'll ever see. But outside of that, they did nothing in the first half. And then they go into the second half there. They score 23 points. Matthew Stafford finishes the day with 365 passing yards, a touchdown, that interception that we mentioned, 9.9 yards per attempt. And I don't even know what to make of his day because, once again, relatively inaccurate. I mean, we've seen multiple passes now where he has Robert Woods across the middle of the field wide open. He misses him. Another one to Cooper Kupp across the middle of the field wide open. You're looking at Deshaun Jackson down the right sideline. They hit a huge play that was on 3rd and 10, I believe, and it went for like 70 yards. Deshaun Jackson gets pushed out of bounds at the 10-yard line, but it was terribly underthrown, and it should have been intercepted, but Deshaun Jackson makes a great play to come back to the football while the cornerbacks are not even playing the ball and turns a terrible pass into a huge gain where the Rams finally got to score 7 points to start to kind of roll this avalanche of a decent offensive performance, I guess. And so there was a lot of bad plays from Stafford in this one. So not his best game. I'd say maybe this was like a C- type of performance, because at the end of the day, still got the job done, still had that killer instinct, had a lot of sharp passes too, but he did also injure his finger in this game. And there was a boatload of injuries for the Rams in this one. It looked like they lost Darious Williams at one point. They called it an ankle injury, and he didn't return to the game. This was late in the 4th quarter, but it looked like he was hit in the head by his own teammate, actually, Taylor Rapp. Nick Scott, game-winning interception. Then he's hobbling off the field. He looked hurt. Tyler Higbee got knocked out at one point, but he returned to the game. Darrell Henderson knocked out at one point and returned to the game. And then it looked like Leonard Floyd might have also sustained an injury there at the end of the game. So we'll see on these injury updates. That was terrible. I mean, this is why Thursday night football sucks and why the NFL has to do something about this at some point, because guys get injured like crazy on these short weeks. So luckily for them, they at least get 10 days off now to relax and try to get healthy. But I mean, that was a costly win. It didn't look like anyone was too severely injured, which is good. But I mean, that is just terrible, terrible news for a team that needs all these players. Then moving on to the running game, they were outstanding. I mean, Sony Michel, 11 carries, 37 yards, a touchdown. Darrell Henderson, 17 carries, 82 yards and a touchdown, 4.8 yards per carry. Hendo is the running back one. This guy looks incredible right now. Still doesn't look 100% healthy. And like I mentioned, he had some sort of an arm injury. You've seen him on the sideline sort of shaking his arm, trying to get back in the game. And while he was on the sidelines, Sony Michel did a great job. And I really, really want to give these guys some huge props for their work in pass protection. I mean, we all see the runs, right? We see the big gains, the yardage, all that good stuff, the touchdowns. But the pass protection in this game, they both had at least 2 reps that were outstanding. I mean, stonewalling defenders. You always love to see that. And that's the kind of stuff that allows Matthew Stafford to work in the pocket on 3rd and 10 to find someone like Deshaun Jackson downfield. The very underrated players and plays in this game, that's the kind of stuff that makes a good performance on the offensive side of the ball. So a huge shout out to those guys for being willing and then also being good at doing it. There's 2 parts to this, and they're happy to do both of them, which is awesome. You move to the receiver core here. I mean, how about the Robert Woods show? It was about time to finally get this guy some work. 14 targets. He led the team, 12 receptions, 150 yards. That is insane. And then they had a lot of contributors here. Cooper Kupp, 10 targets, pulls in 7 of those for 92 yards. Tyler Higbee, 2 receptions, 14 yards, and a touchdown where he smokes Jamal Adams, a.k.a. Blitz Boy, Mr. Cabo. Hey, man, how's Cabo treating you now? You look at Deshaun Jackson, 1 catch, 68 yards. Van Jefferson, a reception, 16 yards. Darrell Henderson, 1 for 17. Really, everyone contributed in this effort here, and that kind of gets my mind running back a little bit. There was a few more missed passes, like I mentioned, from Stafford that maybe Robert Woods gains another 40 to 45 yards. Maybe Kupp has another 20 to 25 yards in this game. You look at Van Jefferson, he missed him as well once or twice in this game. You might be looking at, another 20 or so yards to his stat line too. So really, all in all, I felt like this performance was really solid by these guys. Not the cleanest, definitely not the cleanest we've ever seen. I mean, they need to do a better job at starting quickly and just not really having all these mistakes, because at some point they're going to come back to bite you. And we saw it really in Arizona in week 4. They lost that game when maybe they shouldn't have, or at least it should have been way closer, I think. So in this performance, you've seen the disparity in talent, I think, where the Rams make a lot of mistakes, but they still come out and win this game versus the Seahawks. They make a handful of mistakes too, but they just don't look like they have that same juice, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So we could dive into this offensive line performance here in just a second. You guys can always follow us on Twitter at QB's MEP, at Locked On Rams, and on YouTube at Locked On Rams. I hit a big bet tonight. I tell you guys about betting all the time. You guys can check them out at betonline.ag, one of our sponsors for this episode. I hit a nice 6-prop parlay for the Rams, of course. It was a nice little cash in my pocket finally. Got close a couple of times, so it was about time. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all your pro and college football action this season. You guys can also go place your bets there. Maybe win a couple like I have. So head over to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 100% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, from football to basketball to boxing, all the way to horse racing. Don't wait, and make sure to take advantage of all your favorite sports right now as the 2021 season has kicked off. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Now we can dive into this offensive line performance before we flip the page and get into the defense. And these guys, as always, feels like a trend at this point. Another dominant performance. I mean, we all came into this season questioning these guys. I mean, Brian Allen, is he good enough? Austin Corbett, can he take that next step? David Edwards, is he just your league average guard, or does he have another step in his development there? You look at left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, 40 years old. Is this guy ever going to fall off? At some point he will. You look at right tackle, Rob Havenstein. People mentioning, should we trade him? Should we trade him during the offseason? 1 sack allowed in this game, and it was a good sack for sure. No doubt about it. Darrell Taylor, a nice rush off the left side there. I think he beat Rob Havenstein. Haven't gotten to see the tape, so I can't say for sure. But man, did Stafford have a lot of time in the pocket, and the Rams were incessant on throwing the ball in this game and down the field, especially Stafford. This game felt like he was not happy with 4, 5, 8-yard gains. He was looking to push the ball deep, and I respect it, because we talked about the Seahawks secondary being very vulnerable, one that, I never really thought was going to be that good in this game, and so he wanted to take advantage. That's a good thing for him. And the offensive line definitely gave him that opportunity. Then we talked about the running game, the running backs, 4.8 yards per carry for Darrell Henderson, 3.4 for Michel. You can't really ask for much more from this offensive line. I genuinely think they had another dominant performance from start to finish when the Rams were doing well on offense in the second half, or when they sucked on offense in the first half. They never really played bad. And that is crazy because now they've strung together 5 quality, really legitimate, good games. Clearly one of the best units in football. I definitely think they have a case to be the best offensive line in football with how they're performing right now. No doubt about it. Now we can flip that page, go onto the defensive side of the ball. And I still don't know what to make of this defense because when you look at the score line, 17 points, not bad. You'd happily take that, especially in a win. But the Seahawks lost Russell Wilson in the third quarter to a finger injury. I want to say it was his middle finger. And for those that are watching on YouTube, if you haven't watched the game, it was kind of disgusting where you've seen his fingers sort of bending down like that. He went to throw a ball and looked to follow through. And Aaron Donald was trying to hit his hand while he was trying to follow through. And it kind of looked like they almost tried to give each other a high five. And his fingers snapped right there. And he only came back out for 1 series, 3 plays, did not really work out. And from then on, he did not come back out. It was the Geno Smith show. And that's why this defense is concerning because this guy got no snaps in practice. He's not the starting quarterback. He hasn't played really ever because Russell Wilson is never injured. And the Rams allowed Geno Smith to drive 95 yards and score a touchdown in a drive. That is not acceptable. He had multiple drives. I want to say 3 that went all the way to the red zone from his own side of the field. That is just not acceptable for a backup quarterback to be doing that. I mean, that is terrible, terrible performance. So looking at this defensive line, Aaron Donald got a sack in this one. And you might be saying, yeah, that sounds about right. That's not nothing special. That puts him at 88.5 in his career, which makes him the all-time franchise leader for the Rams in sacks. Now, they didn't exactly record sacks back when Deacon Jones, Merlin Olsen, some of those guys were playing, so they don't have any official sacks, I think, or at least not many. Maybe they'd have about, 150, 180 if they were recorded back then, but official sacks, it goes to Aaron Donald, 88.5. He leads the Rams franchise history. He's 30 years old. This guy might have 4 more elite prime years. Never mind how many years he might actually want to play. So shout out to him. GOAT, Hall of Fame. You may as well start sizing him for that gold jacket. This guy does it like nobody else. He was living in this backfield, consistently pressuring guys, the best of the best. There's nothing else to say about it. You look at some of these other guys. Terrell Lewis, he also recorded a sack in this game. And I got to give him his flowers because right now he is playing outstanding football. I mean, last week, I think he was second in pressures on the team, tied with Aaron Donald. Now in this game, I don't have the pressure numbers just yet, but he records a sack, and he was in the backfield multiple times pressuring quarterbacks, had a batted pass, a tackle for loss. He's playing good football, and the Rams really need that right now because, as we know, they lost Justin Hollins to an injury about 2 weeks ago, and he's going to be sidelined for, we don't really know, a long time, maybe 8 weeks, maybe 12 weeks. And this is Terrell Lewis's time now. He's going to get more snaps, more playing time, more opportunities to make plays. And through a week now, 2 weeks, he's done a really good job at stepping up. He's clearly been the guy that has stepped up to try and fill that void. You love to see it because somebody needed to do that across from Leonard Floyd, who I don't know what is with this guy. Every time he plays the Seattle Seahawks, I tweeted this as a joke, but kind of meant it, he turns into Reggie White. I mean, this dude is so good every time he plays the Seahawks. It's like he takes something personal against him. I'm not really sure what it is. Consistently in the backfield in this game was an absolute terror against the run. Just a huge nuisance against that running game. Didn't allow them to do really anything. I think Alex Collins, when I look at these numbers here, 15 carries for 47 yards, average 3.1 yards per carry. DJ Dallas, 4 carries, 7 yards, 1.8 yards per carry. Travis Homer, 1 carry for 5 yards. A lot of that has to do with Leonard Floyd. That dude was a problem in this one. And you even seen someone like Obo Okoronkwo near the end there, that rip and dip move where he hits the ball and somehow Geno Smith still held on and still threw it away, which I cannot believe it wasn't a strip sack, but you see some of that talent really starting to flash, which is really exciting. So shout out to these guys, man, because they stepped out big. There were some spurts there, in the middle of the game where it kind of got stale, the pass rush, but I mean, we knew that there was probably going to be a lot of moments like that. They don't really have any elite talents outside of Aaron Donald. So, that's just kind of how the game goes. Then you move to the linebacker group here. I thought they had a subpar day. Just wasn't great. In terms of stopping the run, solid because it's always a front seven unit that has to do it together. But you've seen Kenny Young get burned really badly in the early part of the game. And I can't recall who it was now up the left sideline. It might have been Alex Collins. It might have been someone else. Kenny Young looked like he stood no chance in coverage there. And Troy Reeder, DK Metcalf absolutely breaks his ankles in the middle of the field. Kind of embarrassing, but not that big of a deal. Has to be a little bit better in coverage, but we know that these guys are not huge coverage players. That's never really going to be their forte. The one thing that we have to point out, Troy Reeder did register an interception in this game, which is obviously great. It was off of a batted pass from somebody else in the secondary, aka Jalen Ramsey, number one corner in the NFL. But it's always good to see Troy Reeder make that play. You can't really fault him for that. Now moving to the secondary, a questionable unit. I mean, we talked about Darious Williams getting injured in this game, which hurts, of course. Hopefully he's going to be back real soon and for the next game, but we'll see what happens there. Rookie Robert Rochelle starts in place of David Long for this game, and he was bad. I mean, he was outright bad. There is no other way to put it. Gets smoked by DK Metcalf, I want to say in the third or fourth quarter for a 35-yard-ish touchdown, and in the first or second quarter, gets toasted on a double move by Tyler Lockett down the right sideline where he has to tackle this dude 45, 50 yards down the field and gets a pass interference call, because if he doesn't, Tyler Lockett's walking in the house for a 60-yard score. Just a bad performance from Rochelle. I mean, there's no other way to cut it. He had a nice pass breakup in the fourth quarter near the sidelines in the end zone there, but it was a lot more bad than there was good. Starts to beg that question. Is David Long better than this guy? I think he might be. And, you know, it's kind of hard to go back to him now. After 1 week, you talk smack on him, defensive coordinator Raheem Morris. Of course, I'm talking about those press conference quotes where he wasn't speaking highly of him, and you bench him. Now you can't really just go back. That would be weird, but we'll see what happens with Darious Williams, because maybe, you know, if he can't suit up in 10 days, the Rams are going to have to start Rochelle and Long. So we'll see how that one works out. Jalen Ramsey, on the other hand, he did allow a touchdown in this game as well on some soft coverage against DK Metcalf. I want to say it was about 15 yards. But other than that, I mean, he was tremendous, as he always is. Had a pass breakup, like we mentioned, that did go for an interception and was just outright great. I mean, his coverage is always good. The dude is a legitimately good player. And we'll dive into the rest of this secondary here in just a second. As always, make sure to keep tuning back in next week for the remaining episodes of the Locked On Rams podcast. We're going to dive into the in-depth recap of this game, as well as some of the other stuff going forward. And I want to tell you about our second sponsor for this episode here, Built Bar. You guys have heard me talk about them many times on this podcast. They are the best protein bar on the market. I'm telling you guys, I've tried a bunch of different protein bars. Some are chalky, some are expensive, some don't taste great. Built Bar doesn't have any of these problems. They've got a bunch of different flavors. You can design the box however you prefer. The bars are low in calories, they're low in sugar, they're high in fiber, they have 19 grams of protein per bar, and they even work for you if you are on the keto diet. You'll even get a free cooler with your purchase while the supplies last. All you have to do, just go to BuiltBar.com and use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. And thank you guys, as always, for always making us your first daily listen here at the Locked On Rams podcast. For your second daily listen, make sure to go check out the Peacock and Williamson NFL podcast. These guys, Brian Peacock, former NFL scout Matt Williamson, will take care of you. Share all the biggest NFL news every single day in under 30 minutes. It's available for free on all podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. Now we can dive into the remainder of this game and the secondary members. I mean, now moving to the safeties here. Nick Scott, talk about a big performance for a guy that's still getting a little bit of run. He's not a starter. 5 tackles, the game-sealing interception, a pass deflection. Just a good performance from this guy. And I mentioned he got hobbled up there after the interception as well, so hopefully he's okay. But he continues to show up and show out. It's the other safeties that I'm a little bit concerned about, especially Taylor Rapp, because I felt like he was targeted in this game in coverage. And good for Russell Wilson for knowing that matchup was probably going to be favorable for him, because it was. Taylor Rapp continues to not play well, in my opinion. I think this guy is the weak link in the secondary right now, and the one guy that should be replaced. I mean, Terrell Burgess is literally sitting on the sidelines waiting for an opportunity to get out there, and the Rams refuse to play him. I just do not understand why he's not out there. I think he's so much better than Rapp is as a player, and I think he has so much more versatility. You don't have to cover him up in coverage, because this guy excels in coverage. That's exactly where you want to excel in the NFL today. versus Taylor Rapp, who, yeah, he's a physical player. He's good near the line of scrimmage, but that's really all that he can offer your defense. And I just think he's so much more limited. So I hate this decision. I don't know if it's Raheem Morris just not really knowing his personnel, or if he's seeing something in practice that I guess we're not seeing because we're not there. But there is no way in my mind that Taylor Rapp is a better player than Terrell Burgess right now. And I think Morris is doing himself a huge disservice by leaving a legitimately good player and arguably the best safety on the roster on the sidelines. That's my legitimate opinion. I hate this move, and it's just unfortunate because I think this guy, when he gets his shot, he's 100% going to prove that he belongs out there on the field. Mostly does it for the safeties. Jordan Fuller was pretty quiet in this game. We can move on to the special teams now, and this was the strangest stuff I've ever seen in my life. The opening kickoff, Tutu Atwell trips himself. He tackles himself, falls on the floor, forces a fumble on himself, and it rolls out of bounds, which is so strange. And that was the least of the strange stuff that happened in this game. Matt Gay, I don't know what got into him in this game, but he misses an extra point, which he never misses. And he kicks 2 kicks out of bounds. And if you guys don't know, that's a flag. You can't kick the ball out of bounds on a kickoff. If you do, the ball is either placed automatically at the 40-yard line or further along the field if you didn't even get it to the 40, wherever the ball went out. So twice he gave the Seahawks amazing field position, and he missed that extra point. And that's why I joked on Twitter saying they should let this guy walk home to Los Angeles, man. What got into him in this game? I don't know. It was not good, though. The one good game from the special teams unit, Johnny Hekker, 5 punts, 232 yards, average of 46.4, and 4 of those punts landed inside the 20. So very good for him. I mean, that felt like a classic Johnny Hekker performance, which we haven't seen in a long time. So that was good to see. But that wasn't where the mistakes ended. I mean, you look at Cooper Kupp on a punt return. He had eons of space on a punt return, and he just did not feel the ball. It was maybe 15 yards to his left. He thought it was going to go into the end zone, left it there to go for a touchback. And of course, we know the Seahawks punter, I can't remember his name now, something Dixon, Michael Dixon maybe, great at kicking the ball. And he has some sort of a weird punt where he knows how to hit it near the goal line and it go back to him. That's exactly what happened. Instead of going into the end zone or Cooper Kupp fielding it and maybe gaining another 10 or 12 yards, he leaves it and the Seahawks down the ball at like the 5-yard line. So huge mistakes from the special teams unit. It was strange to see. And like I said, this was the strangest game I've ever watched in my life. And the reason why, if you did not see this, I feel bad for you. And I still don't even know the right answer here, but the Seahawks had a punt that was blocked by Jameer Jones, who was just recently signed by the Rams. I talked about that maybe 8 days ago off waivers. He cleanly blocks this punt. I mean, it was tremendous. The Seahawks punter goes to pick up the football, scoops it with one hand. He looks like he's about to start running for the first down, which he starts doing. And then he punched the ball again a second time. And it was a great punt. I mean, it went all the way to like the Rams 12, 13, 15-yard line. And it was called a flag. And he was apparently not allowed to do that, according to Mike Pereira, who was on the broadcast call. Of course, one of those former referees or officiating experts. He said, you can't punt the ball. That's going to be a penalty and going to go back. And the ref said there was no flag on the play. So I have no idea if it was a flag. If it wasn't, then they introduced a different part of the rule that said you can pick it up and punt again if it's not past the original line of scrimmage, which he did pass. So I have no idea what happened there. I was pissed off when I seen that in real life. How do the refs not know the rules? How does Mike Pereira not know the rules? Somebody here is wrong, and nobody should be wrong. You guys should know the rules of your own sport. So confusing, but I don't know what's right, what's wrong in that situation. Either way, he was past the line of scrimmage, so probably should have been a flag anyway. So just a weird series of events. I'm not really even sure what to make out of it. But at the end of the day, the Rams win this game. It was ugly. 26-17, 2 scores. You can't be too mad at that. And now the Rams jump up to 4-1 on the season. And I talked about this many times here. This schedule is about to get a lot easier. I mean, you're talking Detroit, the New York Giants, Tennessee, Houston, Jacksonville down the line. You might be looking at a team right now that's 8-1 in a month. And of course, we can't pre-count those wins. Anything can happen in the NFL. I get it. But the Rams have to be favored in all of those games. And we're talking about a team that could very well be 8-1, and they have a lot of issues still to hash out. The lack of chemistry, Matthew Stafford suffering like 4 or 5 different injuries already a month into the season. You talk about Darrell Henderson getting injured multiple times. The receivers not really being on the same page all the time as that quarterback. The defense, I mean, there's question marks at every level. I think the pass rush needs to be a little bit more lively. The linebackers just limited in general. The secondary sometimes looks a little bit shut down. Sometimes just looks like they're happy to give up anything that comes their way. A lot of question marks, yet this team is still 4-1. Of course, second in the division right now. They did lose to Arizona and could very well be 8-1 in a few weeks. I love to hear that. I mean, they got out of arguably the toughest stretch of their schedule at 4-1. You're talking about 1-1 in the division now, which is good. They win a road game on the division against the Seahawks, which is awesome. You get to steal that one. And of course, that means you get to play your second game against them at home, gives you a little bit of an advantage. So all in all, not that bad for the Rams. I mean, the one thing we have to look out for here, the injury concerns. What's going to be the injury report moving forward? Are any of these guys going to be missing games in the near future here? Or are they all, relatively, let's take 7 days off, 10 days off, and they should be good to go. Luckily, they get 10 days to relax, rest, recoup. We talk about it as the mini bye week. Unfortunately, this is what happens on Thursday night football games. A lot of guys sustain injuries, but for now, it seems like nobody had any kind of serious, 10-week season-ending type of injury. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully everyone's all right. Prayers out to all of those guys. They battled through this game. Very tough players. You got to give it up to them, as well as Russell Wilson too. I mean, that guy's tough as hell. He went back in the game and his finger was pointed 90 degrees downward. I mean, it was disgusting. So hopefully I caught you guys up on this contest. This was a huge one. I mean, there was a lot to cover in this one. It's really hard to encapsulate 60 minutes of the weirdest football game I've maybe ever watched in my life into a 25, 30-minute episode here. But that's going to do it for this episode on the Locked On Rams podcast. Thank you guys so much for always making us your first daily listen here at Locked On Rams. Make sure to tune back in throughout the next week. We're going to update you guys on all the injuries, deep dive into this game, and everything else you need to know about your Los Angeles Rams. You guys can always come connect with us on Twitter at QB's MEP, at Locked On Rams, and on YouTube at Locked On Rams. Please subscribe or follow to get our latest episodes, content, breaking news, and a whole lot more.